Barak, Ahaya, Alam, Shalom, planet Earth. Welcome back to TRU-TALK. And today, by the grace of the Most High, we're going to try to clean up some more false doctrine, some more misunderstanding that has been taught in the church, where they've been twisting Paul's letters and causing a nation of people to walk in sin, to not fear the Most High, to not live by His words or instructions. And if you just meditate and think about that for a minute, that an organization called Christianity or religion or a church or this man that's standing in a pulpit basically had more authority than the words of the Most High. Basically, you obey him and his thoughts and what he said over the words of the Most High. And even if you did thought Peter was saying we don't have to keep the law, I mean, not Peter, but Paul. Even if you thought that's what Paul was saying, Paul is a man. He has no authority to take away from the law or to give to the law. That's not what Christ sent the apostles out to do. Christ sent the apostles out, his disciples out, to preach the word, to testify of him, not to change anything, but to undo anything. And if you pay attention to what Christ was saying and what the Most High was saying, Christ said, I did not come to destroy the law. And said if anybody teach anybody to not keep the law, they will be called, not if only you don't do the law, but if you teach others not to do it, you will be called less in the kingdom. Not less saying, oh, I'm just less in the kingdom. No, like, I mean, you're going to be thrown in that lake. And then he went on to say those that do the commandments and teach those will be called great. This is Christ talking. And then you got the Most High out his own mouth saying, if you keep my commandments, I will bless you. And if you don't, then I'll bring a curse upon you. So how do we let men and religions tell us that not to listen what the Most High say? If I read it straight out the scriptures and the Most High say do this, who are you going to believe? What Christianity been telling you or what the Most High say? But just to show that what people been teaching is the twisting of Paul's letters to their own destruction. And it's of the Most High. The Most High allowed for this to happen. Because if you truly got the heart to serve the Most High and read His word, then He would truly move the veil from your eyes and you will understand. But we're going to come from Galatians chapter 2. And I'm going to start at verse 11. It says, but when Peter, and as always, I got the King James Version on my left, and on my right, I got the easy, the English Standard Version. So, if you want to look at either one to kind of compare it to make it make sense, you can. But I'm going to read from the KJV because that's what many people are used to. It says, but when Paul came to Antioch, I withstand him to the face, because he shall be blamed. So Paul's saying that I confronted Peter in front of his face because he was wrong. And what was he wrong about? Let's see. Now that's when it comes to keeping things in context. A lot of times when we hear context, we think just the sentence before or the chapter. No, when we talking about in context, we talking about also the culture, the people who wrote this, what was their belief and who was they writing to in this time period, what was going on. That's keeping everything in context so we can get an understanding for their point of view, their mindsets. And remember, these are law keepers that are writing this. Law keepers that believed in Christ writing this. That's teaching Christ. That's preaching Christ to Gentiles that don't know anything about the Most High and the laws in Christ, and to the Hebrews that know about the law but don't really want to accept the Messiah, or some of them don't. The ones that was in authority at least. So it says, for therefore death certain came from James. He did eat with the Gentiles. So when James was there and everything was good, James was eating with the Gentiles. But when they were come, he withdrew and separated himself, fearing them which was of the circumcision, but fearing the Hebrews, the pure Hebrews that that were circumcised after the 8th day from birth. Now, before we understand anything, we gotta understand the culture. What's going on here? What do they mean about? What's this whole deal about him separating himself and not eating with the Gentiles? This is when it comes to you gotta know the scriptures and you gotta know what was being said in the so-called Old Testament or the First Testament. But if you know anything about the Hebrews and the traditions, one of the traditions was not to eat with a sinner. That and you wasn't supposed to eat with a Gentile or those of another nation, because those of the other nation did not have the law and was considered sinners. So in the traditions it was saying, don't eat with a sinner. Now this was not a law. This was not a commandment. You can look through the commandments. Nowhere it says not to eat with a sinner. But this was a tradition of the elders. Just like when Christ confronted them about washing of the hands. That if you didn't wash your hands before you eat, you was considered defiled. And Christ had to get at them and say, hey, you keeping the laws and commandments and traditions of men, but you rejecting the law of the Most High. So Christ came to free them not only from the penalty of the law or the punishment of the law, but from their own sins. And not only from their own sins, but to put things back in order and to say, hey, keep the commandments of the Most High, not man's and man's tradition. Don't put them over the Most High laws and commandments. So in other words, he came to free them from their father traditions. Because it was also a tradition, they was adding to the law and saying, if you walk a mile on the Sabbath day, then there was a sin where you couldn't walk a mile. Nowhere in the law it says that. When a man picked up his bed to walk, it was like, hey, why are you carrying that bed? It's against the law on Sabbath. Nowhere in the Sabbath it says it's against the law to carry your bed or to carry anything. It's unlawful to do any work. You're supposed to rest on a day, but it was adding to the law and putting their own understanding of what to do and what not to do. And these became the traditions and commandments of men instead of the Most High. So basically they was added to the law. So now we got that understanding that this is a tradition, not a commandment, a tradition of the elders of Israel to not sit with sinners. Now we know in every culture there are how you say tradition. In every culture, the Gentiles got a way they do things, and the Hebrew got a way they do things. For instance, in the Hebrew culture, they dress different than the Gentiles. It's not a commandment to wear robes, but it's part of the culture. This is how we dress in our culture. This is how they dress in their culture. Another thing that I realized or found out that in the Hebrew culture, that they only ate twice a day, and this is backed up by scriptures. If you read the scripture, even when the Most High made manna fall from the sky, and you can see that they was gathering for a meal to eat, but it states that you know basically twice a day that they was eating. So is it a commandment to eat twice a day? No, but it's part of the tradition of their culture. Which like in the Gentiles, you know, you eat 3 times a day, snacks in between. So there's always a difference in our cultures, in our traditions, and how we do things. So this is what this about. This is a difference in culture. This ain't got nothing to do with eating unclean. As I heard some pastors say, Peter and James was eating pork, and when the Hebrews came, they stopped eating pork. They was hiding the pork chop. That when the Hebrews wasn't there, they was eating pork chops with the Gentiles. But when the Gentiles came, they stopped eating pork chop. But this ain't got nothing to do with eating unclean. This is talk about the traditions of two different nations. And like I said, the tradition was that a Hebrew cannot sit with a sinner or anybody from any other nation. And the other Jews dissimilar likewise with him. Also, that bondage also was carried away with them, this molestation or whatever that word is. So basically, it's like I like to think of this as if somebody hanging out with a whole bunch of white people, and when you hang out with a white people, you're not saying nigga or what's up, you're not talking with that slang, but as soon as your homeboys come, you like what's up nigga, and you go and sit at the table with them and separate yourself from the white people who you been with all week long, and you sitting with your homeboys and acting like you don't even know the Gentiles no more because the different of the culture. Because now my culture here, I can relate with my culture more. I can relate with our traditions more, and I can fit in with them. So I'm gonna hang with them, and I'm not gonna be with the Gentiles that I've been hanging with all the while long. And he said, when Peter and James did this, that everybody started doing it. Even Barnabas, who was, Paul's right hand man, he also was carried away and said, I'm gonna sit with the Brews. I'm gonna sit with the Hebrews. I'm gonna kick it with them. And that was rude, disrespectful, and I can imagine they had the Gentiles feeling some type of way, especially these supposed to be righteous men, and righteous man is teaching them to be righteous. Remember, they came to teach the Gentiles how to live according to the Most High. He said, but when I saw that they walked not upright according to the truth of the gospel. What is the truth of the gospel? To love all men. To treat others how you want to be treated. That's the truth of the gospel. And to preach that all men can be saved if they believe in Christ. And of course, live according to what the Most High say. And I said to Peter before them all, so he said, I said it in front of everybody. If that being a Hebrew or a Judean or a Jew, live after living after the manner of the Gentiles, Now, people would take this out of context and try to say that Peter was sinning. Do this mean when it said live as the men of the Gentiles, that this mean Peter was eating unclean and fornicating and just sinning? No, of course not. You know, even Peter said when